XO, the award-winning builder of aluminium sports boats, has come up with a new flagship. But as so many projects tend to during development stages, it grew when they started to think, well, what could we do with an extra inch here, an extra inch there? So what was going to be the Explorer 12 became the Explorer 42, and in its final incarnation is being launched as the XO EXPLR 44. Now this is boat number one. This is the first ever XO EXPLR 44. There's going to be a dealer meeting in a couple of days, but before that happens, we got the chance to give it a quick test. So we're going to start right here at the helm, because this is a particularly interesting part of this boat. It's unlike any other helm I've actually been at. For a start, it's pretty huge, big enough in fact for a pair of 22-inch plotters here. Massive screens, keeps both co-pilot and the skipper himself properly involved in a trip. Now, as you would expect, we've seen this before actually in the XO range. There's good elevation here in this pilot house. They're kind of past masters at that, particularly on a boat like the Defender 9 that I particularly enjoyed. And you get a similar degree of visibility all round. We've got quite narrow stanchions. Screen starts a good way forward and it's a reverse screen, so quite upright. Really good visibility there. And of course we got this. I'll open that right up now. A huge skipper's side door that gives you that sort of sensation that you've actually open boating a little bit. And in tandem with that, we got a little side gate, which makes loads of sense. Now, boat number one, the rails don't actually come far enough forward for us to tie fenders off on that, but we are going to get some dedicated fender eyes specifically for that. So as I say, adjustability at this helm station is really very good indeed. So both seats are mounted on top of this individual unit, this single unit which houses the pantry further aft. And this entire unit moves fore and aft on runners at the push of a button. But the seats on top of that unit, they're also adjustable fore and aft, and they both come with bolsters and good lateral braces as well. High quality kit there. And the wheel, of course, is adjustable. But I really like this, actually. You tend to get just the one foot brace down below, but we've got a higher one here, just beneath the level of the dash. So if I sit myself in this position, pop my feet up there, that's a fantastically comfortable position for a long passage. Really relax into it. In terms of the dash arrangement, well, aside from those two massive plotters, we got the throttles here on the right hand side next to the bow thruster. We've got the remote for the MFDs and the tabs and the joystick all on the left hand side. Now you can see why they've done that, because there's not space over here to put them over on the right hand side where you'd ideally want them, because what they want to do is preserve freedom of movement in and out. So that makes lots of sense. But it would also make sense just to swap the thruster and the joystick over. So you've got the joystick over here on the right hand side when you step out the door and you're parking in a marina. Anyway, what we want to do, of course, is get her up and underway. So we'll do that right now. I'll stick her on single lever and we'll get going. But there's a couple of things I want to talk about as we do that. Now, you'll notice, first and foremost, I've just kicked her into gear there. Just easing along at 3 or 4 knots. The noise is unbelievably, well, the noise is absent, frankly. We've got a couple of 600 horsepower units on the back here, and it's just so quiet. We're registering about 45 decibels, which is just nothing. Something else you'll notice as well, and this is common to a lot of XO boats, is the fact that as we're just moving along, accelerating a little bit, 4 or 5 knots, well, the directional stability is absolutely rock solid. And that's because we've got quite a long, pronounced keel on these boats, plus a relatively plumb bow. So we've got a lot of length in the water. You feel that. It's absolutely rock steady. And one other thing I actually quite enjoy here, and you'll see it from your own perspective as we get faster and faster, is that when you put on the pace a little bit, well, that transition to plane is very, very flat indeed. maybe a couple of degrees of bow lift at very most, probably less than that actually. And when I look behind me, even at this stage, we're just moving onto the plane 18, 19, 20 knots. I can still see the horizon very clearly through that back window. Visibility is absolutely superb. But we'll put on a bit of pace now and see how she goes. Now the refinement is still very good with these doors closed. We're still only seeing decibel readings in the high 60s, which again is very comfortable for a cruise. Just drop that starboard side a little bit. That's better. And right away you can see she's a very easy boat to manipulate. She might be quite a big one at the best part of 45 feet. But she's very responsive to the tabs. Responsive to trim as well actually. You can trim her out and you can watch that waterline disappearing aft. Feel the revs and the pace picking up, a little bit of extra efficiency, or you can just dip that bow, just as I am now. See that water come right off here, loads of control there. Very reassuring indeed, I've got to say. Now with these twin 600s on the transom, we're good here for about 46 knots today, just in excess of that. But I think with a bit of experimentation with the propellers, we should be good to push on a little bit closer to 50 knots. But you can also spec this boat with triple 500s. That's very likely, I think, to appeal to the American market, potentially the med market too, which of course is going to be a big market for this particular boat, bigger than any other boat I'd have thought in the XO fleet. And it's possible, of course, in principle, to spec this boat with a couple of 400s instead as the base package. But realistically, you're not going to do that. I was speaking to the guys here at XO and they compared it to fitting a 1 litre engine to a Porsche. And I see their point. Now, this isn't just a quick boat. As I say, it's also quite a refined one. And if you want to cruise long distance, it serves you pretty well there too, in spite of the fact we've got those big 600 horsepower outboards on the transom. So at everything between 20 and 35 knots, we're seeing about 5.8 to 6 litres per nautical mile. And we've got a big old tank on this boat, 1,800 litres just positioned beneath the deck there where the dinette is. So you factor in 20% in reserve, we've got about 1,440 litres to play with. And that gives us a usable range in the region of 240 to 250 nautical miles, which is very useful indeed from the standard tank. What's likely to be most enjoyable about this boat though, is the fact that in spite of its scale, in spite of the fact it's far and away the largest and most expensive boat XO's yet produced, it also handles a bit, very much like the smaller boats in the range. Not quite as snappy as a boat like the Defender 8, of course. Arguably not quite as snappy as a boat like the Defender 9, but that's just a natural consequence of the fact it's bigger, heavier, longer, beamier. But you really can throw it as a bow, as I'll illustrate right now if I get myself a little bit of clear water. Trim her in a touch. We're doing 40 knots now, and if I swing her around to the starboard side, look at that heel, feel that grip. We wash off 3 or 4 knots, but we've done an entire 180 in the space of about 4 or 5 boat lengths. Really secure, really easy to handle. We'll nip back over our own weight and do the same to port now, before these boats catch us up. Again, tremendous heel, loads of grip. It's quite interesting to see when you look aft that the shallower of the props kind of kicks up a theatrical rooster tail for us, but it never loses grip. Keeps powering on, loads of torque. And that's genuinely good fun, I have to say. It's really good to see then that the drive, at least, is exactly as established fans of the XO brand would have it. As for the deck layout, well, that's particularly interesting. So I'll come forward onto the foredeck and face aft. So we look back down the starboard side deck. And what we see there is quite revealing. So we have a low section in the center part of the deck. We have a raised aft deck, which is really quite unusual. And we have, of course, a raised foredeck. And the principle there is that XO wants to generate 2 feasible owners' cabins, one beneath the aft deck and another forward. And that raises another question, of course, because when you have an outboard powered boat, Most manufacturers would tend to use the space beneath the aft deck as an engineering space for the calorifier and the generator and the seakeeper, the air conditioning units, the heaters, the batteries, the rest of that gear. But because they want this space below here to be a proper voluminous cabin, they've had to redistribute those various mechanical pieces around the boat strategically in order to preserve volume inside. So let's pop inside right now and see exactly how that all looks. We'll pop down into the forward cabin first and take a look down in there. As we do so, it's worth noting that headroom is very good at the entrance point. I'm 6 foot, that's probably about, what, 6'4", I would think. And this, incidentally, is fiberglass. The boat is built entirely from aluminium, but this structure for the cabin forward is fiberglass, and the structure for the roof on top of that pilot house, that is also fiberglass, because these are the sections that need to be particularly stylish in terms of their mouldings, and that's much easier, of course, to achieve with fiberglass than it is to bend aluminium into shape. So what we have down here is a big central 4.5 bed right up there in the forepeak. There's some good storage beneath there if I take a little look. Some good strong rams. We have a false floor in there, and as you would expect, that reveals a couple of batteries for your bow thruster. Still excellent storage space, easily big enough for your bags for a week away. Behind that, we've got a little changing seat there. On the other side, we've got some more storage cabinets and these rather lovely sailing style hull windows, 3 of them, vertical, look fantastic. If I spin around, we also have an ensuite facility here. Now, there's some good natural light up top. These skylights are permanent skylights in the foredeck just behind the island sunbed, so they make loads of sense. We also got this, another opening port light on the starboard side, but we have a kind of automotive style go faster grille on there, which is a favourite of Jaakko Kantala, the designer for XO. He's used this on previous boats before, and I've kind of criticised it on other models, and he's completely ignored me and used it again. I've got all sorts of respect for that. It doesn't really work from the inside, of course, because it blocks your view. From the outside, looks super cool. What else we have in here is a good size of sink, good storage, a decent toilet, and if I spin around and face the shower, we have this contraption, which is basically a shower door that opens up. There are a couple of catches actually, there we are. And when you open it up and put it in position on this little retaining nut, what we have there is a cordoned off section of shower, again with decent natural light, and over the other side, as you can see, all your gear, your towel, your bits and bobs, that all stays dry. So that makes loads of sense, given that we've got a relatively compact footprint in here. Having said the footprint is compact though, again, headroom is fantastic. This time, I reckon we got the best part of 7 feet in here, maybe even more. And let's stroll back out of there. There's a nice mirror on the back of that door just to make the very best of the light, and head back up the stairs towards the aft cabin, because this is particularly interesting. And actually, Jaakko Kantala, look at that. That's the designer himself. He's probably just heard me criticising him. He's dropped me a coffee there, so that's great. And he's also opened up the port side of this pilot house dinette to give me access down into that aft cabin, because it really is quite a place. Now, this is where that extra couple of feet has really come to fruition. As we step down here, there's loads of breadth. There's a good sort of scale, but look at this. Isn't that magnificent? Because we've got the raised deck, we've got a proper lounge underneath. You could, of course, use that as a bed or a lounge, whatever suits your needs. And it's convertible too. There's all sorts of options with that. And the custom friendly kind of approach that XO's taken with this boat means that you really can have this in any way you like, whether you want a crew cabin, 2 cabins, 1 cabin, it's all good. But back to the matter in hand, this is fantastic. It looks aft, directly over that stern deck, that aft cockpit. And because these units here on that deck are relatively low profile, and that backrest folds flat to create a sunbed, you can actually get a good view of the water and the outboards from here as well, once you rig the furniture in the right way. But back to the cabin itself. If I just climb in here, you'll get a better sense of the scale of the place. As you can see, it's very easy to access it, and although we have of course, a restricted deck head because of the stern deck above us. There's plenty of height here when you're lounging for a 6-footer. I reckon if you're 6'2", 6'3", you'll still find this perfectly comfortable. And the footprint, of course, is enormous because it encompasses the full beam. But it's a pleasant environment too. We've got these inset LEDs built into the deck head. We've got a couple of hatches there as well for natural light. We've got these windows that look aft towards those massive Verado 600s. And having said that, they've kind of redistributed all the engineering gear around the boat. Well, behind this hatch, we do in fact have a seakeeper. It's been doing its job out on the water and it's been very effective indeed. We've got plenty of storage in here too. It's symmetrical on both sides, so just lift up the backrest. Plenty of access there. And you can see that they've used pretty much every spare inch they can. They really have gone right across to the hull sides and right down into the bilges. There's only a few centimetres beneath the deck here, but it's really paid off. It's a massive space. And as I say, if you want a crew, then you can cordon off a section of this either fore and aft or transverse with access from above for a skipper. And if you have a couple of kids and they each want their own cabin, then again, a central bulkhead up and down here and a single bed in each is perfectly achievable. So this space, I have to say, in all regards, is a bit of a triumph. There's also some very useful storage at the forward end of this cabin. We've got some shelving on that port side. If I spin around, there's a couple of cabinets on the starboard side too. As I say, every single millimetre is worked so hard by these guys at XO. Very hard working boat indeed. The wood, incidentally, is called bleached oak. It's a beautiful finish. Bounces the light around a tree. Very pale and modern and Nordic, just what you want, but of course there are options available. Arguably though, the highlight of this aft space for many people will be the fact that it comes with its own toilet. No shower, of course. And the mouldings from this dinette up in the pilot house, they do encroach on the space, but as you can see, we take a good substantial step down. So it's not really difficult to get yourself in here. And when you do get in here, I'll perch myself on the loo. As you can see, fantastic headroom, lots of mirrors again to bounce that light around, a nice little sink, bit of storage. And with a view like that, you might actually be tempted to leave the door open when you're doing your business. In any case, this is, of course, a pilot house boat. So let's move up into the pilot house itself and see what that's all about. Now, as I say, it's relatively sunken compared to the aft deck and the forward deck. And the trick there is lowering the profile. So if I turn the camera around again, you'll see I've got enormous headroom. But in terms of its profile, it looks quite steely, quite slick. There's nothing noddy car about it at all. The vertical elevation is by no means excessive. So they've really organised these deck heights very well indeed. In terms of the basic layout in here, we've got a starboard dinette. We've got a transverse pantry, as you can see, with a sink there, decent size of sink, and a little induction hob. And that is built into the same unit that accommodates the two Helm seats. So the principle here is that we can shift that unit forward a little at the press of a button, and there it goes on its little runners. It doesn't go fast, but it goes. And then you can access that starboard side deck round the corner here without having to shift the skipper out of his position. Now, of course, there is limited fore and aft length here, so it's a bit of a squeeze potentially. You wouldn't want it to be any tighter than it is in order to be practical and usable, but it does work and it's a good principle. And it gets better too, because if you like, you can have an optional seat that swings up into this position. You can also replace this with seating facing aft, so you can have wraparound C-shaped seating. And in all cases, you still get, if I pop aft, this low profile wet bar built into the space above that big glass panel in that aft cabin. And that is really impressive how they managed to achieve that. An electric griddle, lots of workspace and a sink. So arguably you don't really need that pantry inside the pilot house. But of course, when the weather turns, it is quite a handy feature. Now, I've talked about how XO's really worked hard to preserve the volume in here, and this is another example of it. We've got thermoplastic linings on these bulkheads here, which is nice, thin, low-profile stuff. It's very moisture resistant too, and because they love to work with aluminium, it's not just hollow bits. We've got aluminium struts behind there to make it good and solid. And in terms of the redistribution of those engineering articles, well, that, again, as I say, is all about volume. And if we lift this hatch, you'll see exactly what I mean. That hatch probably needs a ram to keep it there. But as I say, this is boat number 1, so I'm sure that will be remedied. So what we have in here is the generator. We've got the Webasto heater. We've got the calorifier. We've got the 1800 litre tank beneath the deck there. We've got the water tanks further forward. All of that beneath that sunken pilot house level. So the way they've arranged the decks here really is very intelligent. And what's also intelligent is the fact that we've got not 1 but 2 heaters, so we don't have to have a single large one that swallows up the space. And it's the same with the air conditioning, not 1 but 3 air conditioning units, 3 smaller ones, so they can distribute them around the boat, make the very best use of volume, and also even out the weight distribution. As for the pilot house itself, well, as I say, this roof structure is built from fiberglass, and it's quite a complex piece of equipment in its own right. If you look here, we've got a little glasses case built in there. Same on the starboard side. I've not seen that before. That's a lovely little touch. Here's this plateau that I talked about above the screen. Ideal for your various bits of switch gear, your analog dials, your data displays. You can configure that in whatever way suits your needs. We also have a couple of hatches for fresh air above the helm. More inset LEDs, more of this thermoplastic lining. And then some big sunroofs, individual units, one above the pantry where you would want it if you're cooking, an additional one above the dinette further aft. Again, exactly where you'd want it. Big views through the aft window, more inset LEDs, more skylights. And if I climb up onto the gunnel here without falling in, hopefully, take a look at the roof itself from the top, you'll see it's a huge space. Lots of room here for a solar array forward. Same aft, so you can reduce your dependency on shore power or your generator when you come to anchor. And I like the fact that there's plenty of space for a roof rack too. We've seen that on previous XOs, but of course here, there's plenty more space to carry your bikes, your kayaks, whatever you need for your weekend adventure. All of which leaves us with just the decks, the external decks to take a look at. So we'll work our way straight forward onto the foredeck and take a look at this. Now we've got a raised island sunbed in pretty traditional fashion. We've seen this kind of thing on previous Defender models. It works well. Nice big lifting hatch, so you just climb out from inside without having to go back into the pilot house. Raised cushions here with cup holders. This is very comfortable for a 6-footer. As I say though, they're removable. So you see they stand about 6 inches proud of the deck there and can potentially obscure your view a little bit if you're sitting in that pilot house on the aft bench. So removing those to get underway is a wise move, I think, just in terms of opening up the views. Lovely deep safe walkways. And if I move to the forepeak here and lift this up, well, this is interesting too. Now, of course, what we have here is an anchor. But what you tend to expect is the anchor mounted on the stem out of sight, just for simplicity. Thing is, this new flagship XO is designed to appeal to audiences well outside the Nordic states. So it's looking at the Mediterranean and America, where it's going to have to compete with some very stylish Italian powerboats. So the idea here is to hide the anchor away so it doesn't spoil the lines, doesn't spoil the look. And when you deploy it, it lifts up and over and out, so it drops a good distance from your stem. There's still room for a couple of fenders in dedicated holders, 2 on either side. And this is interesting too. This is a Sikaflex rubberized spray. And of course that dumbs down any impacts with the chain, and it also reduces noise. And we certainly saw the benefits of that when we were underway at the Helm earlier. Now let's close that up and head back down the starboard side to the aft deck, to that unusual raised aft deck, and take a look there. And actually, as we do so, this is another little bit of evidence of the clarity of thinking from XO. Again, more of this rubberized Sikaflex spray. And here we have the diesel filler, the petrol filler, the water filler, and the waste point, all in the same compartment with a proper heavy-duty drain. How sensible is that? Again, really cleans up the look of the boat, but it's also very practical. And if we move on to this aft deck, well, here are those hatches down into the cabin that we looked at, that big aft cabin. And we have here a very low level C-shaped dinette. There's storage beneath all these sections, limited in the forward part, of course, because we have a fridge, a slide out fridge on both sides, and an enormous subwoofer in that section of the unit. But of course, this table drops down into the space and there are infills, so you can turn this into an all-over sunbed. And this is the backrest I was talking about earlier. Very simply deployed. We just push that forward and rest it down. get rid of that table, and then you have lovely views from that aft atrium just next to the bedroom. And one other thing to mention while we're back here on this aft deck is the fact that the arrangement at the back end of the pilot house there, well, that's been designed specifically with the intention of delivering at least the option of a compact flybridge, just with a helm position and a couple of companion seats, very much in the fashion of Targa or Sargo. Well, sadly, my time with the XO EXPLR 44 is at an end now. The dealers are arriving, they're jumping on board as excitedly as I did. But happily, I think the verdict here is a very straightforward one. Now, in the past, excellent though XO's fleet has been, you could say that it was a bit limited in application because they were principally designed for the Nordic market where people boat differently. Well, this is the antidote to that. This is designed to appeal to the American and Mediterranean markets with its extra usability, its extra volume, its extra style, its extra luxury, its extra customization potential. So I'm willing to bet on the evidence of what I've seen today that this boat has what it takes to make XO a serious international success in both markets.